now.
Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is two-time Jupiter 500 winner Greendragoon.
Wow. Was there any illegal maneuvers involved with that?
The steward's investigation came back negative, so no.
Ah, sweet.
You won fair and square.
Or so they think.
Or so they think. You're adept at covering up your cheating. And in the end, isn't that the real victory? And we also have with us the man who holds the record for most crashes in the Antarian Transstellar Rally, Markhawkman.
And yet I lived.
You just can't keep clear of those asteroids.
Also, technically, in the rules, you're not required to avoid the obstacles. That merely gets to the other end of the course.
Yeah, he uses an interface generator.
But in that particular series, everything is legal, so. And we have our guest tonight. Please welcome STOAdmiralAaron.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be on again.
Well, we're glad to have you. One of the probably the most prolific tweeting author we have in the Foundry community.
Hey, you gotta run that social media.
You do it better than everybody else.
Well, thank you.
Even the devs use Twitter nowadays.
Yes, I've been punching them to be more active. No, I'm kidding. I haven't been punching them.
Figuratively.
Exactly. Where are we this evening? I can't seem to find us.
We are in the, I'm glad you brought that up. We are in the cave on Ryza, the old Ryza, I should say, the original one that launched with the game, which we also have as a Foundry map.
The mouth of the cave is in the southwest corner of the island.
Yeah.
You have to approach it from the sea.
So if anyone listening to this live wants to join us, there is a Foundry Interact in this cave, which has long been used for exploiting missions, which, it's good every so often to bring attention to that sort of thing, because exploiting, it damages the game as a whole, and it damages the Foundry, frankly, because these things, they take up space, and they take away from what we believe to be the real thing that the Foundry is supposed to be doing, which is for real missions.
Also, they kind of ruin the game economy, too.
Yes, there is that.
Do fill in the blank for me. What exactly are they using the cave for an exploit?
Well, somehow people are able to get around the requirements, and I'm honestly not sure how we do it, and I wouldn't want to say even if I knew, because I wouldn't want to teach people how to exploit. So somehow they're getting around the requirements to make a mission qualify for rewards, so then they can just do them over and over and over again and get lots of dilithium.
Interesting.
And they crop up every so often. New ones crop up, and some guy the other day was silly enough to post the whole thing on Reddit, like a how-to do a particular exploit, and then he included a exploit Foundry mission. And he said, "Go play this. It gets you lots of dilithium." And he named it so, which made it really easy for me to go report it. So, if you're interested at all in the health of the game and the Foundry, you got to report exploits.
Exactly.
Because a fair game that's functioning well is good for all of us. Anyway, the other reason we're in here is we got the summer event coming up. And it's always good to remind people, because I'm sure everybody forgets, that, as I said before, we have this map in the Foundry. And the cool thing is that swimwear works on it if you use it in the Foundry. If you have it in a mission, you can go on there, you can mess around in your swimwear to your heart's content at any time of the year. So, little advice for when that ends. All right, let's see, what else? Not too much going on in Foundry Town since our awesome 100th episode, but we did get a fix for a bug. All of those Herald mobs that were spawning bluegill for some reason, they're now spawning the correct Heralds. So
I did notice
we can all
one
make
other
those,
little bit of news.
Go for
It's kind of only very loosely related to the Foundry, but Trendy, Laughing Trendy, has been talking and tweeting about kind of a organizational restructure of sorts for her community staff, and as well as volunteers and whatnot. But I know that in a post she was made, she had mentioned the handling of the Foundry challenges as one of the various, I should say, numerous projects that the community team has to handle. And so part of this restructuring was to be able to delegate such projects down to herself, other members of the team, community team,
That'd
as
be
well
great.
as volunteers.
That'd be great if we get someone to run the challenges.
All I can say is, Trendy,
Obviously,
if you're
we
listening,
haven't had one since New Year's.
Trendy, if you're listening to us, we are a very helpful group of people, and we'll be happy to assist you in any way we can.
And really not just us here in the Skype call tonight, but yeah, I mean the whole Foundry community is great. I mean there's just all kinds of people there who would be willing to help. So
Well, that was what I meant, but
that is what you meant. I read minds. I'm a Betazoid.
So am I.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I knew you were going to say that too.
is there like an empathic loop that forms here?
Yeah, something like that. So let's talk about the Foundry challenges. I mean, do you guys see any improvements that could be made to the challenges? Any ways things could be done differently?
Well, one of the things that kind of caught my attention is that the first time is the whole thing of having only one person actually get a reward at the end. That particular aspect of the challenge is something that I've never particularly liked.
So you could think up, maybe like a sort of a tier rewards for first, second, third place, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, it you don't necessarily even need to have only a single person get the top tier reward. Even I mean, because if you have two people who do a really killer mission, why not have both of them get the top prize?
Sure.
I mean, because in that Ancient Secrets or whatever one, I mean, we had Kirk Fats, Suridam, several other people come up with some amazingly intricate map work, and having only one of them get spotlighted, and
Well, I think one of the things we might want to do if we were going to redo how challenges work is maybe clean up the spotlight list a little bit. See if there's any authors who are willing to sort of retire their spotlights, maybe have them go back to being regular missions. I'd be more than happy to do that on my KDF one. And just to make it a little bit cleaner of a list, to get have more room for newer missions on there.
Is the KDF spotlight that particularly lengthy list?
My attention related to what Trendy was saying on the forum is that a mysterious person from the Cryptic Studios team named Cryptic Rock posted in the thread, and as far as I know, the only person other than Trendy who is an actual Cryptic Studios employee to post in the thread. I don't know why he posted.
I was going to say, Trendy is not a Cryptic employee.
Well...
Yeah, she works for PWE.
Whatever. Close enough. The thing I was just wondering is that who this rock guy is and what he has to do with the Foundry Challenge.
I think he's fairly new to posting. I don't know how long he's been there, but
As he,
Yeah,
I can't
I'm
imagine
looking
they're
at a post
hiring
from-
right now after going through a
and the join date of
layoff phase.
I have no idea what he does.
so is he even a real person? I mean, the thread in question looked like a test post.
Cryptic
Like,
Rock, Cryptic Studios team. I mean, has the gold text on it.
Yeah, but I mean,
The post he made in the thread was completely nonsensical and had nothing to do with the actual topic. So, yeah.
I saw her tweet earlier today, something like Cryptic Rock is my new favorite person. We were talking about H.P. Lovecraft.
that's true.
So I think he's a real person.
Probably a real person.
But anyway, back on topic. Pax in the chat room is saying maybe have spotlights last 6 months each.
So the real trick with something like that is that we would need to be able to refresh the spotlights. So we would actually have to pretty heavily be featuring new spotlights.
Yeah, you'd have to have a new one every 6 months at least, if not a couple in between.
But Spotlight Grinder. Actually, though, haven't some of the missions been spotlighted for several years now?
Oh yeah, I mean, going back to to some of the very first ones. I mean, even I mean, you remember we were talking about that yesterday, not yesterday, last show a little bit, because yeah, First Cause then Effect. That's been up for a long, long time since like the Foundry first came to holodeck. So 4 years or more.
I don't know the full extent of Trendy's plan. She likes to speak in metaphor.
And pictures.
I think she's leaving
Gifts.
details vague because plans have not yet been finalized.
Yeah.
More than likely. And some of these things you have to play by ear and do as you go.
So I can say this. When our former community forum manager was present, I was actually talking with him a lot. And I knew there was a lot coming down the pipeline. He never specifically told me what was coming down the pipeline, but he did say change is coming down the pipeline in regards to a lot of things. Now, the top 3 system kind of was one of them. But there were other things like a potentiality. There was supposed to be basically a Foundry podcast done on Twitch, the channel, by him, and I was actually supposed to be the special guest. That was something that was actually supposed to be in the works, but
well, you know, you have a changeover like that, and you know, the new person isn't necessarily going to pick up on everything the old person was going to do.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, because
That's just natural.
But right before he left the company, Smirk was actually talking about how he decided on what the theme for the next Spotlight Challenge was going to be. And then he left, and he never told us anything.
murder mystery on Ryza.
I keep thinking that as far as the challenges are concerned, it's something that for the most part could be self-regulated by the community since they're voted on.
Mhm.
I mean, you could have a player starting run the topic by Trendy just to make sure the topic is kosher. But beyond that, I mean, the only interaction that's required is to make the posts and declare a winner based on votes.
And there's nothing that says the winner has to be a spotlight, has to be spotlighted either. I mean, you could make some other kind of reward for it.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, I think that could be something community driven. I think there is enough of us to be able to figure that out. I mean, we're not a overly large community, at least not the people who are active in talking to one another. But there's definitely enough of us we could get that done.
Absolutely, and what I actually think would be really cool is my problem with the challenges is an author like myself. I'm terrible at spelling and grammar. I think everybody is very well aware of that. and why I have a secondary person review everything before I publish now, is because of the time frames associated with a lot of the challenges. I don't enter for that very reason, because I know I'll just get murdered on spelling and grammar. So what I think would be cool was announcing them, like several months in advance, going, okay, this is going to be our spring challenge, our summer challenge, our winter challenge, right? Go with kind of the seasons maybe, and then say, these are what we're thinking for the year, and then go from there. Then me as an author can go, okay, well, I won't have time to do them all, but I definitely think I have something for the summer, and I definitely have time to get it built and spell checked and grammar checked before I publish.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea, to be sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, what if they were to mix it up? I mean, sometimes there's a challenge for more of a short story where the development time is only a month, and other times there's a challenge that's longer and runs 2.5 months. Then you get a little bit bigger variety.
Last challenge, which was the New Year's challenge, I threw together my entry in something like 2 weeks.
And I praise you guys for doing it because I can't do it.
I actually spent, I think, an entire day just working on the character costume for, what's her name again? Linnea. Yeah.
Well, I've done one in 24 hours, but I can't say it was my best.
Yeah, that was definitely not my best either.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of planning.
But having at least some challenges, if not all of them, with a bit of a longer frame of time, can be helpful for a lot of authors, and maybe get a little bit more participation from those of us who, and I'm totally like this generally, who take a while to build a mission.
So, on a related note, what do you guys think about just spotlighting missions in general? I mean, because it's been forever since we've seen a mission just spotlighted through the regular process.
Well, to be honest, that was Brandflake's thing. See, Brandflakes, as community manager, when he wasn't busy, he would rummage through the Foundry, find things that he thought were worthy of being spotlighted, and, spotlight them.
Well, I think we've firmly established that the Brandflakes may be a near impossible act to follow.
At least as far as his Foundry interaction. But that's something where maybe we could help Trendy out a bit, and maybe make some recommendations.
That's actually one of the things that Trendy talked about, is that she doesn't have the time required to do that because of the fact that she's a community manager for STO, among other things. And so she doesn't have the time to, take an hour out of her week and play a random Foundry mission.
So if we could help her make it not random, if we could, ask the community at large to give us some recommendations for what they think is a spotlight-worthy mission. I mean, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. And, we'll go from there, and then maybe we can present a recommendation to her.
That sounds fair.
I mean, could we do something similar to what was the Foundry? What was that team that Rogue put together to play new missions? The Foundry Strike Team.
Yeah.
Something this or that. So, like a loose association.
The Spotlight Strike Team.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, to be sure.
Yeah.
Especially since it has the potential to, well, one of the things that the Spotlight challenges do not do, and are explicitly designed not to do, is to take missions that have been, written and being rewritten over and over again, and then spotlight them after they've been rewritten for the 12th or 30th time.
Yeah, what you don't get is the really insanely polished missions that have been up, that have been essentially vetted by the community as, the ratings show these are great missions.
But I mean, I know for a lot of players, the Foundry Spotlights kind of represent a sort of safe zone. Because I know fan fiction can be a little daunting to new readers.
Yeah, and you can get the people that just don't like certain characters and they'll give you 1 stars. But I think the top 3 system has really helped us out in this avenue as well. I know my missions were, I was always having to like really remind people that they were out there. Now with the top 3 system, I'm less likely. So I'm thinking maybe if we can incorporate the top 3 system somehow into this, it might actually help.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
what if we did this? You pick a populated system, and you have people play the missions there. Form a team, have people play the missions there, and see which one people think is the best, and present it for spotlight.
Absolutely, and what you maybe need to look at is the strength of every single Foundry author that is really vocal within the community. You have people who do the podcasting, you have people that are very active on social media like myself. Maybe we need the clout of all of us together with our voices kind of, hey, out there, might actually be something that's extremely beneficial.
Now, Rogue Enterprise is in the chat room here. He brings up a good point, which is, what we're talking about a lot is sort of an author recommendation of a mission. But that doesn't bring in the opinions of players who aren't authors. And it's very hard to get their opinions, other than just looking at the ratings.
Yeah, it's very hard to get non-authors to try new missions.
It is. Because they're never sure what they're going to get.
In my opinion, it is and isn't, but I guess that's because I've dealt a lot more with the new Foundry author players. I tend to get that a lot in my reviews. I've never played Foundry missions before. This was awesome as a first stance, primarily because I've used the social media to kind of draw them in, right? So, like I was saying before, maybe if we can find a way to have like our vocal, like our clout as authors, what we each are very strong in, and kind of pump it out there, maybe we can get more of a wider audience in terms of the response.
And we could always try and find specific people as well who we know to be players of Foundry missions, even if they're not authors, who the kind of people who like to play the missions that are usually spotlighted. We can find those people. They leave reviews. They ask you questions sometimes over email. Things like that. I'm sure we can find these people and try and get their opinions, or get them to play a mission and see if they think it's a good one.
Or we just hunt them down.
Exactly. We harass them until they do what we want.
This is what stun pistols are for, right?
Careful, they outnumber us.
Stun? Who puts it on stun? It's always kill.
Anyway, why don't we move it along to what we've been working on, and why don't we talk to our guest first? What have you been working on lately?
Well, interestingly enough, I started working on the next mission that I'm coming out next year. It's going to be a long process. It's definitely nothing I've ever even done before. And I'm just going to come out of the gate and say right now, if you're expecting anything like what I've done in the past, it's completely 180. I've been discussing with my co-writer, so I actually have a co-writer this time. She's the one who's actually handled all my editing and my grammar, my spelling, and basically bettering my stories for me. So we're going to actually get together and write this entire story together. And we're kind of looking at maybe like something that's a philosophical sci-fi. So we just had our opening discussion just the other day about where the story's kind of going to go, the characters involved, kind of just like the opening of the floodgate to see where we are on the level playing field. Because when you're writing together, it's a completely different game, because one person has one opinion, this is the way I kind of want it, and the other person may have a different opinion. So that's kind of where I am right now. I've only built one map, and it's not even 100% complete right now. And that map only represents maybe 2 or 3 minutes of gameplay. It's really just the initial stages. I didn't want to go too far into building anything yet until I've really kind of sat down with my co-writer and said, what is the story? How are we going from here? What are the characters? What is the main goal of this mission? What is the message we want to get across? And what I've said since day one of coming up with the idea of doing my next mission was I wanted it to be exploration as my way of kind of giving a tribute to Star Trek in its 50th anniversary. And it's a long road. It's not going to definitely be out until 2016, but I do have a working title right now, and it's called Invictus.
Yeah, that reminds me of creative writing exercise that I had to do in an English class once, where the guy that was my assigned partner had, well, let's just say that he wanted the story to end with everyone except the heroes die. And I didn't like that idea.
That, you know, cooperating with writing can be a great exercise, or it can be a really tiresome exercise. You know, it sort of depends. So, I mean, I know you're in the early stages, but how has it been so far doing this kind of collaboration?
Well, the good news is it's not the first time that me and her have actually collaborated. She has basically added many of sentences, expanded my stories, critiqued me. She's done all the editing and grammar for Adrift Variants and Redacted 13. So we kind of have a level playing field.'re both fans of the same genre of Star Trek. We both love Janeway. We both love Voyager. So we kind of have a mutual understanding, and we were very good. It was like we had to end the conversation the other day because we're like, okay, wow, this has been 4 hours of us just throwing ideas and not writing anything back and forth with each other. But she's really excited to actually be a co-writer this time as opposed to somebody in the background fixing my errors. So, but I think it's going to go smooth. Me and her have been friends for almost 10 years now, so we have a really good understanding of each other. So I think everybody's in for an interesting ride. And one thing I will say about her is she is a philosophy major and an English major. So I think it's going to be a really good story.
Well, sounds definitely very interesting. All right, Dragoon.
I haven't touched the Foundry editor too much lately, mostly because Part 3 is still deep in the map building stage. It's not something I can really pursue too much at this point. And for me, map building is kind of the seed on which everything else is built. So I've been mostly just trying to get my Delta recruit through the Cardassian arc, which I finally did.
Well, boy, doesn't that take time.
One thing, though, I did do was that I have officially moved Midas Parts 1 and 2 to the Pico system, which is actually between Risa here and Seoul.
Can you explain why you did that?
A couple reasons. I'm hoping it's a little bit more on the trade route if you're heading south towards A7. But at the same time, the big reason I chose it was because it's got a binary star. I mean, up until the sector space revamp, the none of the stars, except for maybe, like a couple of the new ones, had binary stars. But the mission is supposed to take place in a binary system, and so the Pico systems not only had the binary stars, but had the correct color of binary stars, and it wasn't occupied by anyone else. So, just seemed like a win-win-win all around.
Yeah, I remember when they were starting to talk about the sector space revamp. I think you and Taco were having a discussion or something about where the Midas Array might actually be. I'm not sure if you ever pinned it down.
Well, it's not pinnable. I mean,
because it's never specified in the show, right? Exactly
no.
where it is.
There's a couple of clues were given. One is that they get a weather report from Deep Space Nine, which puts it somewhere within long-range sensor range of Deep Space Nine, but at the same time, one of the letters in it, the M, stands for Mutara, which seems to refer to the Mutara Nebula, although it could just be...
is it the Mutara Nebula or a Mutara Nebula?
Fair enough. We don't know for sure.
Indeed. I kind of faced the same difficulty in my mission that I'm working on for the Iconian War series, which is I wanted to set it next to, sort of adjacent to Xindi territory, which of course they're Federation members, but they have their established area where they live. And I was trying to figure out where that might be, because it's certainly not on the sector space map. And so I was trying to figure out, and I was asking people, where was the Expanse? Because obviously that's where they lived. I would guess that since the finale of season 3, with the spheres gone, the thermobaric clouds around the Expanse have dissipated, and it's just normal space now.
One hypothesis that I came up with is that the Xindi Expanse is actually the region that is currently occupied by Atlantis, the exploration cluster next to Sol.
So Delta Voranus?
I forget exactly what it means.
Delta Volantis.
Volantis, yeah, and I remember that part. I remember. I guess it was Delta. Because one thing we know about it for certain is that it's actually very close to Earth. It's on the other side of Earth. It's close enough that the Vulcans attempted to explore it, but it's not in the same area that the Vulcans and the Andorians and Tellarites were fighting over.
True.
So, there's not a whole lot of places it could be.
So my thought was, I believe there's a line where it says it took him 3 months to get from Earth to the border of the Expanse.
According to Memory Alpha, it's 50 light years away from Earth.
Yeah. So my thought was, let's go towards the galactic core and say that the Xindi territory is somewhere up that way within the borders of the Federation currently, because they're members. And so I set it up towards the galactic north of Sol. And now obviously there's plenty of doors up there to choose from, but it's sort of finding canon locations that you don't know the location of within the bounds of the map that we have can be difficult.
Like a needle in a haystack.
Full of cactus thorns.
Something to be argued is we know that the Federation did a bunch of late expansion out to the, I guess it would be the galactic east of the Klingon and Romulan empires, out further past where the Romulan Republic is right now. So it's possible
we do see that on the Star Charts maps.
Yeah, and I know TNG did a bunch of exploration out that way. So maybe it was maybe it's out there.
There's a lot of maybes. Well, maybe it could be here, maybe it could be here. So I kind of just picked one.
The real problem is
the writers didn't think about the location enough for us to ever pin it down.
Well, there's that, and you don't necessarily have to on a TV show. You don't necessarily have to show exact maps of everywhere.
Yeah, the other trick is that we never see no one we ever run into in the Expanse is like seen outside of Enterprise, so it's not like we can link it back to.
Actually, that's not entirely true.
Is there someone we see that?
Some of the episodes that we see in the Expanse involve the Bosliks as minor background characters, mind you, but they were there.
So where's the Boslik homeworld?
No one has any idea.
Okay.
So it doesn't. That does narrow it down.
They were, however, also seen in several TNG and DS9 episodes. One of them involved a Boslik expedition retrieving scrap metal from the Gamma Quadrant and selling some of it to Quark.
Just watch that episode. So, I mean, maybe it could be north or south of... Ooh, here's an idea. What if the Mutara Nebula is a remnant of the Delphic Expanse?
That's
there you go.
Yeah.
Now, is that a door? A Foundry door?
The Mutara is a Foundry door.
And where did it move somewhere? Where did
it moved up out past Romulan space, up into that upper corner. No, I take it back. They put it back. Because it's supposed to be south of K7. Like way south. And I think they moved it to the edge of the map.
I see
around
Cestus,
there. Like on the
Fortress. Oh yeah, there it is. It's way down on the other side of Klingon space.
Map.
That doesn't really work for, I think, where I was going.
That's just a theory.
In any case, for my mission, you don't necessarily have to, at least for now, you don't have to go to Xindi space. It just has to be adjacent.
But I mean, I personally think you could make really good use of one of the exploration clusters as kind of going into a region and not really saying exactly where you're going.
Well, to be honest, Eridan would seem to be a perfect choice for this because, you said you wanted north of Sol and on the edge of the map, and at present it's both.
That's possible.
I was actually thinking about moving one of my missions that's on the top 3 thing for that one, but the only reason why I didn't do it immediately is the fact that last I checked, it was the only one that used the location that it started from.
Speaking of the top 3 system, the one of the reasons I haven't moved it up there is that it's pretty out of the way. So right now it starts the Elvrin system, which is in the Taniba sector block.
Well, one thing I've noticed about the cluster doors is that people have a specific reason for visiting them. So you will often have people go there just
for
because.
Doth assignments, of course.
Yes. And that will give people more reason to look at your mission than if you were to do something like having it start at the Lurst system. Because, let's face it, how many reasons do you have to go to Lurst?
Probably none.
Well,
in fact, there's several missions, or there's several doors out there that people have no reason to go to right now because there's nothing there. They're just empty systems, other than Foundry doors.
Know, where the Lurst system is without looking at the galaxy map?
I do not. I was just thinking about that one that you mentioned, and I do not know where it is.
I think it's one of the systems that they added when they revamped the galaxy map. So, of course, it's just sitting there off in space somewhere with no actual purpose beyond being a Foundry door. It's actually on the edge of Ronstadt is the Romulan Star Empire, and it's on the side near Borg space. Anyway, though.
Yeah. So let's see. As far as the mission itself goes, the map work is almost done. I actually threw in a new map, which I showed some screenshots of on the forums. Setting a wrap-up scene at the end in a space dock, and I'm using the Earth space dock and building out in the space dock itself rather than using the playable map geometry that was already there, so I can have that neat background out a window. Obviously, I have to wait for Zero's fix of that map in order to publish, but it's not ready to publish anyway. So.
By the way, I love all the new assets they gave us. Like, I'm dying. That's why I had to build earlier.
Well, this is a pretty good time for Foundry authors, I gotta say. Other than a few bugs here and there, but I mean, we're getting regular assets. We're getting some maps put in. This is a good time.
And I can
The
always
funny
ask
thing
for
is-
more, but might as well be satisfied with what we have.
Sure.
Exactly. The funny thing is, I was actually discussing with somebody else who's kind of building, I guess, for personal reasons, not necessarily for, publishing a mission. And I was saying to this person that I can actually build around these bugs. Yes, they're annoying, and yes, they're adding extra time to what normally would have been a couple seconds, but I'm actually able to build around them. But I can understand how some newer authors who don't necessarily remember how placements certainly kind of look, and maybe moving it left or right, could see that the visual bug is definitely an issue. But funny enough, Salami Inferno just posted about 29 minutes ago that he had a great chat with Zeronius Rec about her favorite pre-launch Foundry bug. So they're discussing. Yeah, they're discussing Foundry bugs, eh?
Oh my god, what would go back to pre-launch? That
This
is
would be
still
back
around?
when it was in testing on Redshirt,
Gosh,
before any of us got in.
I'm not sure I even remember.
Well, you got to remember, Zero was one of the lead testers, QA
Mhm.
testers for that.
So she would know better than me, obviously. I don't know. The things that I remember from back when the Foundry first appeared was things like, how the two-dimensional editor was all wireframes. We didn't have that was the graphical representation of the objects that you were working with. And I don't know, I prefer the images that we have now, or at least we have when it's working
Well,
properly.
there are some situations where the wireframes were better because sometimes when you have multiple objects on top of each other, you can't see the ones on the bottom at all. Because that's one thing I
that's
noticed
true.
when I was putting together some of my things, that you put down a platform, you put some things down on the platform, but one of the things that you put down just kind of like overshadows everything, and you can't see the other objects anymore.
One of those.
It would be nice to have layers of some kind that you could put things on.
Those-
like in
those-
Photoshop, you have layers, and you can make one layer invisible so you can work on the layer below that.
Yeah.
Well, Neverwinter has
one
a
of the
feature
worst-
for to prioritize assets. So everything with a higher priority will always appear on top of things with lower priority.
Oh, I did not know.
Well, I mean, like when you're building a custom interior, placing the ceiling. I mean, granted, the editor does have a feature where the order you place maps or place objects on the map determines their priority, but this, of course, means that you have to place all of the largest objects first and then the smaller objects later, and you can't go back and place a large object, which is annoying. One of the worst objects I've found for this are those giant mushroom-shaped trees. Or is it tree-sized mushrooms? Well, you get the idea, though. They suddenly have this huge disc that covers up half the map.
Oh yeah. In any case, I'm glad to hear they're discussing the Foundry over at Cryptic in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it leads me to wonder what they're discussing. Conspiracy theories.
Wonder if
Well, you know what that means. Conspiracy theories, so obviously Doom. So yeah,
Well,
they're going to shut the Foundry down.
One old bug that I remember that obviously you can't do anymore was a glitch that would allow you to enter and leave and re-enter a Foundry map, and go to a second Foundry map, return to the first, and then continue on the story, because it would allow you to arrange the quest objectives so that you had objectives 1, 2, and 3. Well, objective 2 is on map B, and objectives 1 and 3 are both on map A, and it would actually let you arrange the quest of objects like that in the log. The catch is, of course, that when you attempt to play the mission, it does not actually work that way, and it requires you to do all of the objectives that are located on map A before you can go to map B, which horribly messes up the story flow.
I got one for you.
Definitely unintended.
Not being able to despawn NPCs.
That wasn't a bug. That was something
that was a lack of a
changed.
feature.
Yes, lack of a feature.
It hadn't been implemented yet, which is great. I mean, when we got it, it was, and that was one of those things that there's several things that I always point to as examples of don't ever let somebody tell you it's impossible because they said it was impossible and then they did it.
Also, don't ever let people tell you that the devs don't listen to what people say on the forums. It's like the one quote from that Bob the Skull likes is what a lot of people in the forum mean when they say the devs don't listen to the players is that the devs don't listen to them, and instead do what they think is best based on feedback instead of implementing the feedback directly.
Yes, there's a big difference and a lot of steps between listening and what gets put into the game. As we well know, since they very much listen to us and put it all in Neverwinter.
Terrible.
Well, we couldn't very well expect them to ignore everything in STO when they built the Neverwinter Foundry.
Well, because they specifically built it for that purpose.
Yeah, Zeronius said that in last week's show. That was actually half of the reason why they made the STO Foundry in the first place, is that they were planning on making one for Neverwinter and didn't want to wait until they were doing an alpha for Neverwinter in order to actually code it.
Well, and I mean, to their credit, they've been definitely upfront with us about, or at least they have afterwards anyway, told us exactly that, you were essentially our beta test for Neverwinter.
Well, still, I mean, unlike Champions, we at least have the Foundry.
Yes. Champions deserves the Foundry, though.
That is like the perfect game at the Foundry.
Champions doesn't have anywhere near the resources to get the Foundry.
Well, I mean, Champions already has a lot of features to the game that would be great for Foundry. I mean, because it works, the engine in Champions works the same as the STO engine, so, you could place buildings, crates, and bushes the same way as you can in STO. Also, Champions has a really neat feature with the way interior maps are designed in Champions, which would actually let the devs reasonably easily implement a modular interior construction system.
There would be nothing easy about it, even trying to port it over from Neverwinter. It's just the games have.
There's nothing easy, of course, but that doesn't necessarily stop you every time.
What I mean by relatively easy is that a lot of the interiors in Champions are already modular. I mean, like, you have this big square room, you have a hallway that connects it to a different big square room. I mean, those are things that could easily be cut apart and sectioned so that they could be placed in an editor. Unlike, in STO, where you have the caves with the fluid, amorphous walls, and fun things like that. Like this cave we're in right now. I can't visualize anyone cutting this apart and using the room itself in pieces. it just isn't made to be worked that way.
Oh,
I mean, obviously you have plants, the rocks and stuff that could be separated from the rest, but those are a minor component.
I don't know. If you look at it on the map, you'll notice that it's pretty much a square. It's a square with some very straight walls leading up to it. So, I mean, this was definitely still designed with room kits in mind.
Well, the entire cave, though, is a single room kit. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Well, I mean, yeah, the cave is probably one. The corridor leading to it is another.
So I think, as far as champions goes, there's sometimes where you have to look at all the things that you can do and look at the potential benefit. And sometimes it's going to be a monetary benefit. And I can understand a lot of the gravitation towards that. Things that you're going to get money out of because it takes money to keep the company running. And sometimes it's about the health of the game, and you have to weigh those decisions. And I think the Foundry is going to be, for champs, it would be more about the health of the game, of keeping players there and keeping players interested. And that, in the long run, will reap them a lot of benefit. But it's still hard to make a decision based on that. Because it's a big if.
The only thing in Champions that's actually a player-driven story is the Nemesis System, which unfortunately is a rather weak player-driven thing because, you create the Nemesis character and the Nemesis character shows up, but you don't actually write the story for the Nemesis character. The Nemesis character just simply fills in a spot in a story written by Cryptic.
Sure.
Although you can do a whole lot of really amusing things with the Nemesis system, like having your Nemesis be a psionic super ninja who acts like she's completely insane.
I've always thought that system is very cool, at least in theory. I haven't been able to see it. I haven't gotten a character up high enough to see it in practice, but in theory it sounds very cool, and it sounds like something that I think ought to actually be put in STO, but with maybe more, a more advanced version of it. Because how many, in Star Trek, how many times does a captain have a nemesis all the freaking time? Q had Picard and Q, Cisco and Ducat, Janeway and Neelix, right? Every captain has their nemesis.
I think Janeway's nemesis was the Borg Queen.
Sure, if you want to go with the obvious choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little harder because Star Trek doesn't quite follow the tropes as closely as a comic book based villain hero setup would. I mean, there's a lot that's very formulaic to a superhero villain relationship. So
it's a lot that's very formulaic to a lot of Star Trek episodes.
if we go back to TOS, we have Kirk and Kang. And for DS9, there's the relationship between Cisco and Ducat. Those are similar to the hero-villain nemesis sort of.
And some of them are very much the quintessential hero-villain relationships, and some of them get a little bit more in depth and change over time. But the hero-villain relationship is definitely a big part of Star Trek.
And then sometimes you just kill your villain.
Oh, where's the fun in that?
Hey, I had to do it. They demanded it.
What, you actually kill your mirror twin?
I can't comment for those who haven't played the mission.
No spoilers, right? We don't like spoilers much. So anyway, we've gotten away on a huge tangent here, but I still have to ask Mark if he's been working in the Foundry.
I didn't have time to do any actual work in the editor over the last weekend. Been kind of busy with college stuff, you know.
Understand. Real life is the nemesis of the Foundry. All right, so let's see. Any of you guys have any mission reviews? We didn't talk about that before the show, as we often do, just to set it up.
I don't really have a full review, but I did play a mission a couple weeks back, and it was... I really wish I could remember the title, but it's definitely good. It's definitely good.
Well, if you think of the title, let us know, so we can recommend it to everybody.
Absolutely.
Dragoon, I believe you tried to play Sir Boulevard's Iconian War mission.
I did, and the Iconians won. I am still going to try again. I think I was playing it on advanced, and I need to, which is what I normally play on.
That's a mistake.
And I need to dial it down.
He has definitely stacked quite a few Herald space mobs on top of each other. I had trouble with it. It died a number of times.
Well, the problem is that he has allies to assist me, and the Iconians just killed the allies, and then I was left by myself.
Yeah, my recommendation is, unless you are like in the DPS club, you know, those guys who are pulling 100,000 DPS, don't play it on advanced.
I love going into missions with those guys. You just sit back and they destroy everything before you've launched one phaser.
Yeah, I think it's the Iconian probes that really get to me. When you're surrounded by 5 of them, they keep coming faster than you can destroy them.
Yeah.
And you get watching 2 and 3 subsystems go offline at the same time.
One thing that I've noted about the Iconian probes is that they hate AoE spam.
Yeah, when that many targets, AoE is not enough.
And anything AoE, if you're playing against Heralds, is going to help you.
Also, the Iconian probes are stupid as heck. They will fly straight into warp plasma like they think it's fun.
That's a thought.
I hadn't considered that one.
And while they are annoying to kill simply by shooting at them with directed energy weapons, that is only due to the fact that they have a high evasion ability, which is utterly trivial if you use torpedo spread or, like I said, warp plasma. Because torpedo spread is guaranteed to hit the target, and warp plasma, well, it's an AoE. It doesn't really have targets.
Well, to make Sir Boulevard happy, I will say that my ship has been destroyed several times in attempting his mission.
Mine as well. I don't know. How do you guys tend to go about creating combat encounters? Do you look for ways to make it difficult, or do you throw down mobs willy-nilly? Do you have an idea of what you want to do beforehand, or how do you guys approach that?
I like to think about the fact that there are certain people who are insane enough to play missions on Elite that they have not played on Normal yet. So I try not to make things that are actually difficult on Normal difficulty. I mean, I have done several where you fight multiple mobs at once, but those are ones where you have allies helping you, and they're not really particularly tough mob. So even on Elite, you're not going to find yourself fighting like 10 battleships all at once or something stupid like that.
Well, I think that's a good way to go about it.
In general, I tend to just follow the difficulty based on a single group, with captains being my big boss mobs. It's pretty rare that I'll stack groups together. And in general, I mean, just watch for a lot of testing to see how the groups fare when against each other. If I'm doing like a large space battles.
Well, what I've done... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it can be really tricky.
It can be, and it's one of those things I continuously watch with my reviews because it does vary. Sometimes I get your combat is extremely easy, and then you get your combat is extremely difficult, right? And it's finding that fine line of where it's acceptable. And what I've done is, because testing in the Foundry environment is absolutely useless for me, I generally republish a lot of missions prior to launch underneath like code names that I create, and then I go and play them using. I have about 6 or 7 tunes ranked on like the tune I'm logged into right now. He's pretty up there, but I have tunes that are still only level 51 right now, and I stop leveling them when they have like X gear, so they don't even have the best gear. And I play tested the mission just to see how difficult the combat is. And in one of the most recent missions, Redacted 13, I had basically a holographic arena, the holodeck, and in that space, I actually had a mob of 5. You had to beat 5 of these people, and I realized it was too difficult. And then I tried it with 3, and I found it was still too difficult, so I bumped it down to 2. So it was a lot of testing prior to launch. I did with a lot of different tunes from science to engineer to tactical to see how the combat ranged.
The biggest complaint I've ever gotten related to combat in any mission I ever wrote is in Treasure Hunt. Because I threw down one of the Cardassian captain mobs, and it happened to be the Cardassian captain mob that whips out a hollow emitter and creates 5 duplicates of himself to shoot phasers at you. People apparently had a lot of difficulty killing that guy. Don't understand it personally, because if you actually pay attention to what's going on and destroy the holographic generator, the holographic clones go away. Apparently, a lot of people didn't think of that, so they were, getting shot at by like 10 Cardassians all at once, and didn't really know what to do. Oh well.
I know. Actually, I know at the end of EVA Resolutions, I've got a Captain Undyne mob, and I know I've had people complain that it's too easy, it's too hard, and that's something that's a cryptic balance and not even me balancing.
Yeah, and they rebalanced that one when they released Season 9. They changed all of their Undine mobs across the whole game.
Well, I mean, obviously they made them look different, but they also updated their powers to be more interesting. Because that big energy rift weapon from the Lobi store is actually a replica of one of the Undine Captain's powers.
I guess you have it just right when you have people complaining that it's both too easy and too hard.
At the same time.
It's the Goldilocks principle, right?
More or less.
Let's see. Johnny Snowball says he says when possible he likes to give people the choice of combat or puzzles, which is nice when you can manage to do that. Sometimes the setting and the plot doesn't allow you to do that. Like obviously those of us doing Iconian War missions, we kind of have to have some combat, unless you get really inventive.
You can beat the total Iconian Empire with a puzzle. I'd love to see that.
One thing that I'm thinking about doing is having a mission where you go to this planet and find out that the Bosliks have been contracted by 2 different races to do stuff at this planet. And well, you find out that the reason is that, one, the Tholians have detected Iconian technology there and have decided that they want to, they don't want to alert Starfleet to the fact that they know it's there, so they called the Bosliks and had the Bosliks dig it up for them. But at the same time, the Hirogen want the Bosliks to retrieve samples of an unusual creature that lives on the planet that, well, may or may not have been bioengineered by the Iconians. Which, it isn't the sort of mission that would actually require combat with the Heralds. You might have some sort of combat in the mission, but, it's in the same scheme of things, just not focused on actually fighting directly.
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach.
I'm not sure if I'm actually going to do it or not, because I don't know that I have time to do it, unfortunately.
Always another project.
Oh, yeah.
I would love just to know how to do puzzles. I'm still very iffy with puzzles. I attempted one in Variants, but I don't think it really was much of a puzzle, as it was more of find the correct answer.
Well, you gotta remember there's lots of kinds
we know
of
people
puzzles.
who know puzzles around here. I mean, Dragoon here set up a very elaborate sequence in his part 2 that I would classify as a puzzle.
Yeah, it was basically a bunch of combination puzzles layered on top of each other.
And you have to remember codes and things like that. Luckily, you don't have to remember them for too long. They're told to you quite quickly before you have to use them.
Yes, and I made sure that all the different possibilities start with different letters, so you really only have to memorize the first letter.
You just told us the cheat.
For someone who's had to go through that like 15,000 times.
Yeah, that's part of the difficulty of making a puzzle, I imagine, is that you gotta run it yourself a million times to make sure it works and make sure that all the wrong answers work.
Yeah, I think you found one of those.
I believe I did in testing, yeah. Johnny Snowball is another one who is great at puzzles, and Bazak as well. So if you need advice, that's where you go.
And then the wrong answer always gets you stabbed with him.
That is a risk you take.
Actually, I have a
I'm dealing with
recommendation if you
Bazak.
want some less cerebral puzzles. To look at Star Trek 25th Anniversary, which recently came out on Good Old Games. That's kind of got some interesting...
Were you paid to say that?
I was not. Except for the fact that I've been lobbying them to start including Star Trek games for forever. But I mean, that puzzle one I did in part 1 was inspired by 25th Anniversary. And it does involve math.
Math?
But math is good for you.
Math doesn't quite make for good Foundry missions.
I think lots of times people play games to get away from things like math. Even though, really, we wouldn't have video games without math.
I think that's the hard part, is integrating the puzzles.
Making it not feel like work.
Yeah,
Actually,
to get to the end.
If you talk to people like Jarvis and the other people who are good at making things explode, they will of course tell you that if you want to kill things, you need to know lots of math.
Well, I always say that, I've never been in a car accident, and it's because I can do complex physics equations in my head. Not really. I just know when to slow down.
Well, actually,
and know
more or less
how
the
to
same-
avoid hitting things.
Well,
Don't curse yourself now.
Calculating the path that your car is going to travel is a complex physics equation.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is.
It's just that you use approximations instead of actual numbers.
Yeah, it's only sort of a joke when I say it. Because all life can be reduced to math or physics, which is essentially a form of math. Anyway.
Unless it has anything to do with humans.
Yes. So there was a question submitted by the community that I didn't get to last time, and I thought it'd be great to save it anyway. And this is a good group to ask it with. So the question was, what elements should you hit on to craft a good Star Trek story? You know, the kind of story that gets you that review that says, wow, that was just like an episode of Star Trek. Things like that. So what do you guys think of when you think of a good Star Trek story? What elements does it need?
I personally kind of like a certain element of mystery. Kind of building to slowly revealing details about whatever the situation is. Kind of leading the player on with breadcrumbs. Because, I mean, in a Star Trek episode, there's always that element of them figuring out the problem. I mean, they see lots of evidence of the problem right up from the initial incidents, but it kind of builds, and they figure out this particular element of it. Oh, there's a connection here, and then they finally build it up to, oh, such and such is happening that's causing such and such, and this is now we need to deal with it and solve the problem.
Well, the first thing I thought of is that episode of TNG where Riker and several other members of the Enterprise cast are on this uninhabited planet, and they happen to find this artifact that was built as a sort of temporary housing structure for a crashed astronaut who had somehow gotten marooned on this planet. So some friendly, helpful aliens built this little habitat for him, and I guess they were expecting other members of his race to eventually retrieve him.
You're talking about the Royale.
Thing is, they never explained who. Yeah, they never explained who built that thing, and it's just one of those things. Like, wait a second, what race had the power to build something like that on such short notice? And was actually willing to just like toss it out and then forget about it. You're just looking like, who the heck did that? Because it's not one of those ancient history things. It's something that happened within the last few hundred years.
Well, I think there's an element to the idea that the universe is more fantastic than humans. So, I mean, there's always kind of been, especially in TNG and TOS, there was always that sense of discovery of we may not know what we're getting into, but we're going in anyways. Then they figure it out as we go.
Famous quote that reminds me of is that the universe is not only stranger than we know, but it is stranger than we can know.
The Star Trek quote, if ever I heard one.
Goes back to Q's rant about all the things that are waiting out in the universe when he's talking to Picard and Q Who.
Like filled with wonders to satiate the soul.
Yeah, something like that.
Timid and gross.
Both subtle
but
and
it's
gross.
not for the timid.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always think of when I think about Star Trek is teamwork. It's always teamwork that saves the day. Maybe not always, but a lot of the time it's Geordi down in engineering does his part, and Worf at tactical does his part, and everybody pitching in towards a common goal. And I think a good Star Trek story has some elements of that.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy employing more conversational tone between the bridge officers. That no one of them solves the problem, but it's a combination of all of them contributing. Because while we can't really characterize the bridge officers too much. We can infer
We
some
can
things
infer
about
that
them.
they're at least good at their job.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't employ them, would you?
Yeah, and that they're Starfleet officers or Klingon officers or Romulan Republic, but but I mean that they're officers who are going to have a certain sense of professionalism. I mean, I always tend to write my dialogue with the observation lounge test, which is picture a scene with Picard, Worf, Geordi, and depending on whether you're focusing more on medical or science data or Crusher. And just run your dialogue through them and their voices. Does it work? If you can make it work with you picturing it, those three people plus Picard interjecting as the captain, if you can make it work there, then it'll probably kind of keep some of that Star Trek feel.
Or maybe a conversation between Scotty, Spock, and Bones.
Yeah, choose your favorite Star Trek crew, right?
Yeah. Minus the regional inflections, of course.
Oh,
Well, it depends on.
Personally,
Actually, for a Foundry mission, you would want to leave that out simply because you don't know what race they are.
Yeah, I'll call you out of my.
yeah, don't write in dialect. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Unless it's your own original character.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of go to TNG because it's they are kind of neutral in that sense.
Of course, they were trying to get Troy to do some sort of alien accent, which she eventually dropped. But that's not
actually in her case. She kind of sort of managed an alien accent simply by not hiding the fact that she has an accent. Because,
she has a very strange combination of accents.
Kind of British.
She's actually Greek.
Kind of British, kind of Greek, right? Yeah. And I think she based I was reading this the other day, a little note on Memory Alpha, something like she actually had based a little bit on an Israeli accent for the first couple of seasons of TNG until Majel Barrett came in to play her mother and didn't use any kind of an accent at all. So she just dropped it.
That's probably.
But if you ever heard her speak, she has quite an interesting speaking accent normally, and it quite an entertaining person.
Well, if you want to listen to a different character that she's done, you could listen to her do Demona in Gargoyle.
I love Gargoyles. Great old show.
Because
it's like Star Trek. It's like TNG, the animated series.
in Gargoyles, she has a very noticeable accent, but it's. I'm not entirely certain if she was trying to make her accent sound a little bit more like a Scottish accent than it normally does, but her accent was thicker there than in TNG.
Anyway, we love tangents, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've just been listening to this.
We absolutely do.
We were loosely still tied to the topic.
Well, and I told Dragoon the other day that it's not a problem that's endemic to us. All the podcasts do it.
I think when I was part of the Decade crew, the tangents we used to go on, sometimes I think we never even really discussed the game. Discussed a whole bunch of other things.
Well, the purpose of this podcast is to be a mixture of information and entertainment. Tangents, well, whatever. As long as you're informed and or entertained, it's called good, right?
And when you're neither? Well, moving on. I don't know. We haven't heard from you on this topic, Admiral Aaron. What kind of elements do you think make a good Trek story?
Well, the funny thing is, I actually had to go through this recently. If you guys had ever seen what I originally envisioned for Redacted 13 and what it is now, you'll see how much of a change I actually went. And I went more to what would make this mission feel more Star Trek oriented, right? What would make it feel like a good episode of Star Trek? How do I end it off? And it was one of the things that I fundamentally hated about the original ending I wrote. And I actually said to my editor, and this is the main reason why I had delayed it. Instead of coming out early January, it got delayed till about March. Was I wanted to rewrite the ending because I wanted to give it that Star Trek feel. And I felt like an aspect of like understanding among alien races and that fundamental belief is, okay, we've done something bad in the past, but we can always correct it in the future. And it's not always you've done bad, that's the end, right? And I kind of wrote that into the ending of Redacted 13, and it's actually done extremely well. From the initial beta testing that I ran through with the beta testers who had played it originally and then played it again when I rewrote the ending, was they gave me the thumbs up, and the response from the community itself was they absolutely love the ending. The ending because it was something that they never expected from all three missions. And I definitely feel that gave it a Star Trek feel, like something that was not expected to happen, but actually ended up happening. And I'm not trying to ruin the ending by giving away exactly what happens. So I'm kind of ditzing around, if you notice.
I think your plot twists are good. Are definitely good because there are all kinds of plot twists in Star Trek. Throw in any episode you want, and if there's a mystery, it's not the first thing they think of, it's not the second thing they think of, it's the thing they didn't think of that actually happened.
Well, every time I stop and think about various things in the Star Trek episodes, one thing that I notice is that when you actually pay attention to the episodes, every single episode has some aspect of the episode that, if you were to be uncharitable, could be considered to be a glaring plot hole. Like I mentioned in that whole thing with the Casino Royale. What alien race was both advanced enough to do that, close enough to do that, and apathetic enough to do it and just leave it there?
I think in that case, it's a matter of
episode.
It's a matter that the identity of the alien race is not necessary to the plot, and so they don't bother to dwell on it.
That's what I was actually going with this, is that it's not important to the episode. It's one of those things that as fanboys, we look at it and we think about it, but the writers didn't give it a second thought because of the fact that it wasn't important to the story they were trying to tell. I mean, like in TNG, when Picard is off prospecting for De Bruyne artifacts, they don't go into any real detail on who the De Bruyne are and why they aren't around anymore, but they mentioned that they were a offshoot of the Vulcans, similar to the Romulans, and that's that. All we know about them.
I think, in general, Star Trek is a franchise that is always at risk of over-explaining things, and sometimes going a little too deep into their exposition.
That's the criticism I often see leveled at Voyager.
Yeah, I think honestly, especially Voyager,
justly or unjustly,
it was more obviously made up.
Because if you don't explain enough, then people get confused about what the setting is, and they don't understand what's going on. But if you explain too much, the story gets bogged down, etc., etc., etc. Actually, you know what? As a quick example of this whole thing with Picard and the De Bruyne, if they hadn't explained that the Debrune were an offshoot of the Vulcans, the reason why Picard was prospecting for Debrune artifacts would have made no sense. So they needed to explain that bare minimum of who the Debrune were in order for the story to make sense. However, going beyond explaining that they're a Vulcan offshoot wasn't really necessary, or even explaining why they're prospecting in abandoned ruins, because, well, it's just the story.
Well, I think that's a good point for us authors, is that we should be almost constantly be looking and judging whether or not various explanations, dialogue aspects are in fact pushing our story forward or just dragging it down. Because I mean, I know personally I can write to high heaven and will have a tendency to try and explain every single little possible loophole I can think of. But at the same time, I mean, it just starts to become wordy.
Well,
And
this is one of those things where I like to use optional dialogue for this, because, there are a lot of things that people might be curious about that are, backstory sort of things that don't really fit as part of the main story, which is something they can't do in a TV show. But it's one of those things that's very common to find on a DVD special features. Is like, okay, you have this, say the movie is about humans fighting some alien race, and they don't really explain a whole lot about who the aliens are and where they come from, blah, blah, blah. Well, you might have, a commentary thing on the DVD special features that is, and I guess you would say a biography of the alien race that was in the movie. But they can't wedge that into the movie because they're not telling a movie about the biography of the alien race.
So that brings up something that we were actually talking about on my other podcast, which is Fraxstars at holosweetmedia.com. Shameless plug. The deleted scenes. It's a show about Battlestar Galactica, and we go through each episode, and we were talking about deleted scenes because there's, to get a episode of TV, much like Star Trek, down to the 42, 43 minutes that it needs to be, you end up having to cut, or sometimes you end up having to fill time that you didn't have. So looking at what professionals in this area cut from things can be very instructive. A lot of the times it's character exposition. There was one that I was watching recently for Battlestar Galactica where it was, a big flashback scene into a character's past, and it told you lots of interesting things about that character. And it was a good scene. It was well acted. It was well staged, but it wasn't necessarily necessary to the plot. What you needed was for a character to say the thing that he learned back then that's integral to the plot now. You didn't necessarily need to see him go back to that moment.
Well, that actually reminds me of something that I heard about the second Avengers movies, that the woman who plays Black Widow in the movie was watching while they were cutting the movie, and looking at an almost finished version of it, and there's this one scene where she was talking, where her character was talking to someone, and she watches the nearly complete version of the movie, and she's like, you know what, this scene throws off the tempo of the movie, and we don't need it.
so it's funny you mentioned
something. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's funny you mentioned deleted scenes, because we had that debate between you and I about the deleted scenes in Wrath of Khan.
We did over Twitter not too long ago, because I was complaining that my Blu-ray copy is not the extended version, which contains a few deleted scenes.
And I was kind of making the argument
theatrical
that,
cut.
I kind of felt like the added scenes in that particular movie didn't really advance. It kind of just tended to repeat things or add things that didn't really advance the plot.
Well, a lot of deleted scenes have, good reasons for why they were deleted. I mean,
Absolutely.
all of them have some reason why they were deleted. Sometimes it was just because, they said we want the movie to be 2 hours long, and the current cut is 2:20, so we need to find 20 minutes of scenes to cut. Sometimes it's that sort of a reason. Sometimes it's something like the example I gave earlier, where a certain scene, while the scene is nice in and of itself, the way they cut the movie together, the scene just didn't fit. It was kind of like, the movie gets sidetracked for 5 minutes.
Yeah, pacing is a big reason why a lot of scenes are deleted, because, the editor and director, as they're going through, they say, okay, this is bogging us down. We need to get moving. We need to get the main plot moving, so we got to cut that scene. I think they cut a whole reel back when they actually used film from the movie Aliens, which is there's some great scenes, I think, which are back in on the DVD version that I have, and they add a lot, but they aren't really necessary for you to understand what's going on. And so I can see exactly why they were cut. I like to have them in there when I'm watching at home, because I don't feel like pacing is as big a deal on home video, because you can go make a sandwich. You're not sitting there in the theater, and that pacing is important when you're in the theater, absolutely. But on home video, which is why I buy any extended cut of any film I like that I possibly can, because when I'm at home watching, more is better.
As far as another thing there is that, it's like the thing I said about how sometimes they'll set a limit on how long they want the movie to be. That is in part because when you show it in a theater, people may or may not want to sit there for 3 hours. They're more likely to be willing to sit there for an hour and a half or 2 hours than they are to sit there for 3.
Absolutely. An interesting exercise for Foundry authors might be to, think to yourself, what would an extended cut of this mission look like? And is there anything in it that would have been integral that I should put back in? Or is it all good? Is there anything I should cut out that isn't working, that is slowing things down?
I think my missions are already an hour long. I need to do more cutting than extending.
As an example of a deleted scene, my mission Treasure Hunt originally had 4 segments where you were walking through that valley with the Borg stuff everywhere. I eventually cut one of them because it was this complicated jumping puzzle where you had to halfway scale the side of the valley, jump onto a catwalk, walk across the catwalk to the other side of the valley, because you had to go over a force field instead of turning the force field off, or something like that. So, you would climb up on the catwalk's above the force field, then you go do this set of. Well, I cut it because of the fact that particular jumping puzzle was, well, I'll put it this way. When a jumping puzzle is challenging for the person who designed it, random people who don't know how the jumping puzzle is supposed to work will probably have a lot of difficulty with it. And honestly, it was awkwardly put together. So I actually left that map in there simply because of the amount of time I had to spend arranging the objects to get the jumping puzzle to work. This is, of course, one of those situations where it would have been extremely beneficial to me to set the altitude of the objects to be relative to 0, even though I didn't. It would have worked out a lot better if I'd done it that way, and maybe I could have gotten it to work, but I didn't. So yeah. Anyway, the current version of the story was actually completely rewritten so that you don't actually have a reason to even walk through that section of the valley. So I couldn't just put it back in, because after I cut the scene, I rewrote the story so that the scene's existence no longer makes sense.
You do have to remember, when you cut something, you have to remember that if there's anything that refers to that scene or any vital information you got in that scene, it has to be somewhere else in the mission. Now, Aaron, I know you do a lot of revisions. Do you find that you find good places to cut? Or do you miss the things that you cut?
Well, the interesting thing was, it was only Adrift that has had the bulk of the revisions, and that's primarily because it was the very first time I published anything, and it was new, and I didn't really know what would work and what doesn't work. So Adrift was the one that always got the polishing up, and now it's at a stage where it's good. But a lot of my revisions come now prior to launch. I think the biggest one was most recently when I was working on Redacted 13 again with the whole ending. I changed the ending. I had a massive Borg battle planned for the very ending of the mission, because I figured it would be nice to sum it up, and it would be 1, 2, and 3 in which something like that happens. But every time I got to that point at the ending, I'd be like, ugh. I kind of cringe a little bit when I got to it personally, and I would be like, I don't really like that. I'm like, and I'm like, me as an author, I'm like, So I eliminated it completely, and I didn't have to incorporate it anywhere in the mission, and it makes sense without it. It doesn't need it. It didn't need it. I didn't need to continue it at all. And that's definitely something that was originally supposed to be in it. It was in there until January of this year, and then I cut it completely in January. But definitely, I look at what the community is saying when I get reviews. I'm very quick. And that's the thing, is when I see the reviews and I see something that somebody's saying, hey, this isn't really working, or I didn't really like this, right? I look at it and I'm like, okay, did they really understand the story, or did they kind of fast forward through it, right? And there are people that I trust when they tell me that things aren't working, and I listen to those individuals. And those are the times that I make massive changes to my missions. Now, luckily, I haven't had to make massive changes in the past little while with either Variants or Redacted 13. They seem to be really good. But Adrift was definitely the one that I had to work on all the revisions, because it wasn't working when it first launched.
Well, and presumably as you do more, you get better at it.
Exactly. I think I've become more in tune with what the story was needing to be in terms, and that's why this one, like I've said, like I'm not planning the next one until 2016, because it's new for me, and I'm worried how people may react to something that's kind of like a philosophical science fiction opposed to a combat-oriented mission.
I think it's good that you're trying new things. I think it forces you to grow as an author.
It does, and it's definitely making me look at things outside of the box. Like it's outside of my comfort zone. And I think I mentioned this earlier when I said the original title was Beyond, because it was beyond my capabilities at that moment. And since then, I've had to rename it because I didn't want to seem like I was actually riding on the tailcoats of Star Trek, even though I had technically said that was the name many months before they said it was the name for the movie.
That sort of thing will happen. I know it's happened twice to Bazag, is that he comes out with a Foundry mission, and then later Cryptic comes out with their own mission, which has the same name.
I know, he said that. I saw that. And it sucks, because you either go with it or you change it. And in this circumstance, I said, you know what, since I'm not launching until 2016, I can change it. I had a backup name and plan just in case, and this is my backup name.
We had that happen with a... go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
We had this happen with a plot, actually. When we were making the Purity series, of course, we planned it, and we were writing, and Captain P.F. Dennis came up with the plot, many, many, many months before the missions premiered, of course. And right as we were releasing the missions, I can't remember exactly where in the process we were, but as we were releasing the missions, out comes Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which has a very, very similar plot. And I was thinking to myself, oh God, we're going to like be accused of copying or something, even though we would have no idea about the plot prior to seeing the movie. There's no way we could have known that, but these things happen. And you just got to roll with it and hope not too many people think you were copying.
Exactly, and a funny thing is, it actually happened with me as well. I had another Foundry author who had actually published several times before me too, different types of missions, actually contact me and said, I hate you. Not like, in a means way. He's like, I hate you. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because you beat me out of the gate. He had been developing his version of what I was developing within basically he said he was working on it for 2.5 years and he just never really got around to finishing it. And yet here I am rolling out with what he thought was a similar concept. Now it's morphed into something completely different because the story is finally told, right? So now he's seen the complete conclusion. He's like, okay, it's definitely different than what I was planning, but similarities in the very first episode.
I had that exact same thing happen. The mission I alluded to earlier that I built in about 24 hours is a recreation of the historical battle between the Klingons and the Romulans, the Battle of Clock-to-Kel Brocht. And I came out with that mission, and then Azurian Star on the forums pipes up and he says, I've been working on that same thing for months, and you beat me out of the gate. And he still hasn't released his. But I think his would have been very, very different from mine because, of course, there's almost no details as to what that battle was.
Exactly.
So there's a lot that's open to interpretation there.
Well, I think that what it was the idea and the concept around the species itself that I had introduced in Mission 1 and similarities to certain other things. But the concept was just kind of like a little bit of a stepping stone for me, and the rest of the story is different, which is why that person is since then who's played the rest of it has been like, well, okay, well, that's definitely different than what I had thought I was going to release. And I'm like, well, you should still release what you're going to do if you're going to do it. And he's like, I haven't really bothered. I'm like, well, somebody else may come out with the exact same idea completely, right? And beat you to the gate.
Absolutely.
That is definitely something I had to deal with as well, just like Pax Federica, in regards to Dust to Dust. Actually, Dust to Dust scared me. Captain Jan, Dark Rider, knew how much Dust to Dust scared me, primarily because I was afraid that me and Cryptic were going to have the exact same story. We were. There was a point in time where we were actually converging on the exact same point in the STO timeline. And I was worried that I wasn't going to get my mission out before they released theirs and that we would have similar ideas. And then that mission with Harry Kim came out, and I breathed the biggest sigh of relief, knowing that they went left and I went right.
I honestly have only one mission that I'm actually concerned that might get, I guess you could say, preempted by a Cryptic mission, and that's the Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant one. Because all of the things I've done are things that I just don't visualize Cryptic writing missions about. Because most of them involve, like exploring the fringes of space and stuff like that, and kind of like the old exploration cluster stuff, honestly, but with more interesting stories.
Well, I think we're at a good place to end for the evening. So,
before we end,
yes, go ahead.
I did want to mention I finally remembered that Foundry mission that I had played.
Excellent.
It's called The Wounded Wolf by Chiron, and I believe it starts off in the Travas system in the Alpha Quadrant, and it's definitely a top 3. I remember seeing it there, and that's how I kind of decided to randomly play it, and I thought it was amazing.
So we have a recommendation for a mission for everybody to play. The
Wounded Wolf. Sorry, I thought I'd interrupt with that.
No, that's absolutely. All right, Dragoon, if you want to throw up our contact info.
All right. If you want to email us, we can be reached at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Marker can be reached at Markhawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
And Admiral Aaron, what is your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is STOAdmiralAaron. It's all one word. I'm pretty sure if you Google search it, you will find me instantaneously as well.
All right, well, then we will say good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night, and thank you for having me on.